My name is Mia Nielsen, and I am Director of Art Toronto.
My name is Elizabeth Dee, and I am a co-founder and CEO of Independent Art Fair in New York.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a chat about the future of art fairs, where we see them going, where how this world is evolving. So, okay. So first of all, how would I start by saying Elizabeth wrote this beautiful piece for, forgive me, was it ArtNet?
Yes.
It was ArtNet in the very beginning of this pandemic. And I thought I loved the way you closed it with, including your email address and, just saying that you were open to this as conversation, and it inspired me to reach out to you. So, and, since then we've chatted a bit, and
we've solved all the art world's problems.
All of them. Yeah, we've pretty much nailed it. So we can retire now knowing that we'll just sit back on our laurels, right? Why not? Yeah, so where shall we begin? Like, what are you thinking about for Independent this year? Is that too big of a question to start with?
You know what? This is probably one of the most exciting times in terms of imagining the future that I have experienced since we started Independent 11 years ago. And, I think similarly, 11 years ago, we were in the 2008 financial crisis recovery. So there was an emergence of a crisis and a sense of, let's use this opportunity to park what no longer works for us and try and have a more responsible future. That was something that was an incredibly powerful time for many of us, that felt suddenly that the playing field was maybe a little bit more balanced, and maybe everybody was wanting something a little different, and that we could maybe potentially test some evolutionary models for the way that the food chain works between artists and galleries and collectors and museums, and really try and tighten those links and maybe make them stronger through a different kind of sense of engagement. And so what we did is we kind of formed Independent as a way to convene an incredible talent pool along those four lines, and to kind of crowdsource a lot of brilliant ideas and try and road test and incorporate as many of them as we saw fit for an event that could take place at a former museum in Chelsea. Fast forward, we've seen, an incredible expansion of the market. It's become truly global. Our art fairs were maybe less than 20% of a gallery's income when we started. Now they're over 50%. So there's been a huge disruptive shift in how the gallery business is operating. Online is now at around 10% and is growing. It's the fastest growing area, actually. And it's going to continue growing. And so now we're at another moment of reopening and business of recovery after a major crisis, and we're now looking into a digital future where that is where the innovation is going to be. It's so clear to me, and so I've been I feel like my whole experience with this project has come full circle, where it's a different group of players. Some were there at the beginning, and now some of them are new, like you, Mia, where we come together and say, what do fairs need to be now? What does the digital component look like? There's so much missing from the digital experience around art, and yet there's so much potential to fill that distance. And this has just been the most inspiring time to think about those creative challenges for me. Mm-hmm. And so I have been all day, every day, developing a model creatively, a radical model, which I hope will be very innovative, that would launch next year, which would be our answer to those questions. And I think we have a lot of potential outcomes. And as I said earlier, there's so many potential consequences. And because of that, so many ways to direct our attention now as museums and fairs especially, who I think really care about this about this the most, that we're going to be, transparency is really the key right now. Sharing information, sharing resources, asking questions, trying to figure out philosophically where people need to sit and double down on in terms of what their organizational mission is and where it can be in the future. And that future is going to be a very big balance between the digital and the in real time. And I don't think that's going to change, even when we get back to, a full, complete recovery zone, which I don't see happening until at least the end of next year.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, online has incredible potential to bring people together from, disparate locations and to share, particularly like new media. I'm really excited about how, and this isn't limited to this particular pandemic time, but like how art has been developing online outside of what we think of as these traditional structures, I think is really exciting.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that the job of the art fair is to make these connections with artwork in person, like in space, to be there with an artwork and to experience how it changes that space or how it changes you, depending on what you're looking at. So I'm curious, who are your most important collaborators right now?
It's interesting. I've been really working with, obviously, the galleries first and foremost. And the gallery, there's two sides to this future. One is the need to have some kind of discovery platform, e-commerce platform, and scholarship platform around the digital, what I call the digital catalog. And so that's been very helpful for me to be in touch with regard to that problem. It's like putting the fair online, whatever your version is of that. Mm-hmm. And the galleries, which are essentially right now, the way that they are developing is viewing rooms that the galleries have on their own, just all combined into one platform. So it's very much like bringing the model of the fair online, which I have, certain questions about, and I think there's still room for growth and improvement there. And the galleries are the ones that really understand the goals of this. The goal isn't really to replicate the fair online or the gallery online. The goal for them is to create, and this is very important, a sense of scarcity and a sense of urgency around focusing on one artist over a period of time that's a very short period of time. There is still a collector psychology that it's a buyer's market, and especially now in a crisis, it always is a buyer's market. So it's really important that fairs fill that role to create the deadline. Fairs really, exactly. It's similar to auction. Fairs and auction are the most valuable sales engines right now for galleries, because galleries can have a show, then they have to close it for COVID, then they reopen it. It seems like there might be for months to decide whether you want a painting or not, right? And galleries really need that consistent understanding. They also are trying to drive value, so they want to limit that marketplace extremely and build the demand. And so that is something that all luxury businesses share. And, the online solution has to be in line with those agendas. Then there's what I call and I put myself in this category, the enthusiast experience, which is completely and totally missing from everything we've seen online, except for when galleries and artists come forward, bring their voices forward and engage with Instagram. And it's an Instagram live and you can chat with the artist and they're having a talk. And like that kind of interaction has been extremely successful. Or doing a deep dive on an artist. We just published a beautiful profile on the artist Richard Kennedy, who is having his first show with Perez Projects in Berlin. And we had Carly Busta, the critic in Berlin, write that for us. And it was like a 2,000 word look into an artist at a particular time when he was coming into the community and with his work. And it just felt like completely the future, and you really got that from doing a very deep dive read. So, long profiles, really looking very, very thoughtfully at an artist's voice and what their vision is. That's the appetite. And that is, really a content question, not necessarily a tech question. These two things are operating in a fragmented universe right now that needs a lot of development. And I think they need to, fairs and museums, or fairs really need to figure out both sides of the equation. Museums have to do it without the sales component, without but they still have to create a different kind of value around their exhibitions, and they still have to make those available to people who are afraid to go inside. So I think that's it. And then I think, like museums, we need to think beyond the walls of our organizations as well.
Our spaces,
we have to think about being outside. We have to think about what that means. We have to work on that more fully and have a robust program in the public realm, because that to me is like the third part of it. And we are just moving more and more toward that. And I hope that will be, to me, this is a very dynamic time to be doing that. So to answer your question, talking with the galleries, then talking with other fair organizers. We started a WhatsApp group.
Yes, which is great.
Which has been good. And I think it hopefully will pick up. And then I've got ongoing Zoom calls with people on the tech side, and getting as much advice in adjacent territories of technology. And a lot of great people are around and are willing to talk. And I think and to share their insights and their experience right now. And I think it's a great time to imagine a new future marketplace that exists online. And also to imagine a level of content that's much better than what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. Something that has always really impressed me about the Independent is what an artful experience it is. That going to your fair has always felt like has that kind of that to me, it kind of like the gravitas of like being in a museum. Like it's an exhibition space that facilitates sales, where I feel like a lot of fairs that I go to are like, to me, I read more as a mercantile space. So I'm curious how that, my impression of that, how does that focus on the experience influence your direction for where you're going to take the Independent?
How does for me, I've just never not known anything else. I was a former gallerist for 15 years, so I'm a curator and I'm an author, and I publish books and I research a lot, and I'm a maker by design. So for me, it's not a real estate business. It's not a mercantile. I'm not a retailer. We are working together in the community to build something that's more reflective of the actual gallery culture or museum culture, as you were pointing out, because we have worked in former museums, and I think that's been a big part of our identity. But, for me, the exhibitions, I never understood why the trade shows needed to continue setting themselves up like trade shows. Like, anyone can do that, make it more exhibition driven. But they would have to change their business model, and their business model is run by other corporate interests, and ours isn't. That's so we just have a really unique role in the space, and I think it's it gets more and more valuable as time goes on to people. And I think that we need to, especially now with the world that we're living in, and it's just so important to get away from this idea of capitalism,
Yeah.
and which has kind of put a filter on looking at art that is that's can destroy a lot of greatness. And I think, we have proven that we can translate things into sales, which is very vital, and we care about the market greatly, but as a result of a discovery process that has authenticity. And I think that it's hard to do that in a mercantile space, because you're not in control of a lot of factors when you're doing it. You're not in control of what your neighbors are showing. So you could have the most thoughtful artist who spent 20 years making a body work that you're showing at a fair, and then you can have, artwork that was produced for Instagram, next to you.
Yeah.
And it's just, we've had a lot of noise pollution in the art world, invade the art world as these fairs have scaled. And it's created a lot of levels of quality, and it's just added to the mix. And I think now people are really, thank God, willing to slow down and have value the social exchange and the contemplative time that you need to look at art and how it feeds you. And I think people are really got to double down on that. And it's a great opportunity. And even fairs that are more traditional have an immense ability to kind of capture that spirit and bring that into what they do in different ways. I think it's a really exciting time. How are you feeling about that in terms of your plans?
I personally believe that adversity breeds innovation. So I too am really excited about this time. I love this opportunity to just kind of think creatively about the art fair model. Of course, I'm still very new to Art Toronto. I've been here for a year, and I come from a long curating background and had never worked for an art fair before. So I look at this as an exhibition project. The earlier projects in my career, I'd always thought about developing artist careers. How can I foster artist careers, and how can I help diversify their careers, their revenue streams, and so now I think about that as a macro project in supporting Canadian art galleries in particular, and really showing this how important Canadian art is on an international scale, because truly extraordinary artists come out of Canada. And it's exciting to kind of see them together. So with our fair model, it really is a fair with a national scope. So I'm excited about creating opportunities for communities to engage with their galleries, with the galleries that are in their cities, and to really take that time and make it meaningful. That it's that the time that they spend in those spaces with that artwork is just as valuable as a meditation or a yoga class or whatever you would do in thinking about feeding your soul. I'm really excited about the opportunities for online and for showing art online. I think that we're only really scratching the surface of what that technology can bring. Papier launched I guess about a week ago or something, their app where you can get a sense of what work will look like in your home and how it will kind of function in your space. And I think that's really interesting to find these ways to connect with to connect with new audiences in really meaningful ways, and to deepen those relationships, and to look beyond, like that kind of like art fair weekend, and to think about, and to show people how meaningful it is to live with original artwork, that you're, investing, investing in your soul, like you're feeding yourself in new ways.
Yeah, it's so true. It's about feeding the spirit, as much as it is,
Totally.
yeah, being a part of your moment in time and getting beyond your day-to-day concerns. It's for me, it's religion, lots of
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, I always think, I think about, my space as, and I've thought this way about spaces that I curated, particularly with the Drake, that like, you're creating this contemplative space that I think of, my home is like a kind of, it's the space where I recharge. It's a space where it's a kind of, I don't know, this is really heavy word to use, but I'm just going to go with it. It's like you're building a temple. You're building a space that like represents yourself, your family, your values, your story, your history, your future. And that will always be an incredibly exciting thing for me, And I love seeing people like really connect with an artwork in that way. When they really see something in themselves, or when they see something in that artwork that they never imagined that could be represented. That's a super vague thing to say, but these friends of mine who are relatively new collectors, Anjali Patel, she has this amazing way of talking about the artwork that she buys and how it reflects her time. So it, like her life, her history. So for instance, her family is Sikh, and she has this sculpture by Joe Fafard, who's a very, very traditional Canadian artist. And it's a very realistic sculpture of a calf. And she has it in her like super, modern like home. And it's this moment of disruption in a sense, right? Because it's like this very clean, clean lines, very modern home. But it's this element that connects with her history and with, Canadian art in a way that's very genuine, and something that I never imagined before. I was in her home, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's beautiful. That makes like so much sense for you. So good.
It's an interesting thing how you learn so much about yourself when you collect, and when you discover artists, they resemble a certain chapter in your life. And people have such different motivations, some are more, as I'm talking about, like aspirational, or even, bordering on the, bigger vision, potentially, spiritual or humanitarian, and others are much more interested in being part of the local community and see it as a form of philanthropy. It's such a nuance, or a way to collect around topics and issues that they really care about, that are social topics and issues, like clean water and ecology, these kinds of things. And I think it's really, we have to remind ourselves that even though we're a cultural community, we have to touch these areas and build those links for people to know that it's all connected and that we're part of the larger global context. And You know, if we can bring these artists and galleries to a wider audience through our platform, we've done our job, you know. And that's why storytelling is so important and content is so important. And the experience from the moment you walk in a door or enter a space to when you click on a website or, join a Zoom chat like this, like the whole environment, the tone and tenor of the exchanges sets up a certain kind of possibility. And it's something I really think about a lot. And it's fascinating because we have a lot more, we should empower ourselves a lot more because I think we have a lot more control over those potential outcomes than we realize. When we think about it as an economic constraint or a political constraint or a targeted constraint. And I think we need to expand our minds, and see that we have such a platform to the world. We're representing the greatest artists of our time at these events, and being in helping to kind of support and foster that dialogue. And it's just incredible what we can do. It's endless.
Totally.
And I'm excited about kind of exploring those reaches.
Something that I was just thinking about, and forgive me if I'm wrong in this, but the Independent doesn't have educational programs. Is that accurate? Like, I don't remember seeing like a speaker series or...
We do, but we do it in a very specific way. So the museums are our VIP program.
Okay.
So, and museums, because the museums have a full-time team doing layers of programming for patrons. So members can be invited to things, and that's a very affordable concept. It doesn't have to be an exclusive group or high-level philanthropy. And then, there's other, there's very high-level collectors who are really sitting on the boards of these institutions. And we hire freelance curators that aren't affiliated with any institution, and they run our program during the fair. And we make that possible. We create experiences. So for instance, we had an event with the Brooklyn Museum, and we set up a tour for them at the fair that was just about the women artists living and working in Brooklyn. So they basically were able to tour the fair and, had like very, very deep experience guides who worked only for us to talk about, artists who were emerging in their early 20s to artists who were in their 80s or had passed on or were really more in the historical realm of the 50s and 60s. And it really was, they said the highlight of their year, doing an event like that. So I think for us, education is, we have a more Montessori idea of that, like set up an environment for learning and then learning what happens. Rather than put everyone in a little classroom and have someone at a bully pulpit showing slides when the art is right there. Like, we're just sort of like, it's a bit of we have a more of a Montessori philosophy. Maybe that's because I was a Montessori kid myself. But I think that's how we approach the educational side of things. Plus, the educators are the galleries.
For sure.
They're like the experts.
Yeah.
They've seen every work of art come out of the studio for years. I mean, they have an assessment level, and they're an untapped gold mine of information.
Yeah. I like tying your that education program directly to the works that are on view at the fair. It's that's so important, and something that I, as I kind of learn and kind of wrap my head around some of these, the way things, have been done, like the opportunities, that's something really exciting to think about, like how that kind of deep connection that those people were making to artists in their community, and to that longevity, right? Like, I think that it's easy to lose sight of the context, the history of the art in your community when you think, over like 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. If you go back a century, maybe you're making a connection, but it's that living history that's so exciting about that.
Yeah. I think that also we have that short period of time, right? 4 days.
Yeah.
And, we just have always resisted side programming for that reason. Unless it's in the morning and it's involving visits around town, it's
Sure.
Where we really want people to return to that fair and to start discussions. And the environment is set up for people to meet people they don't know and ask questions that they don't know the answer to. And I hope that becomes, clear over time. But, there's so many ways to approach these things. That's the fun part.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's like, and as exhibition makers, like that, I often think that the only real limits are those in your mind.
Yeah.
The only real limits are the ones that you impose upon yourself. And sometimes limits can be freeing, right? Like sometimes limits can be, can really like propel you to move forward. And sometimes they're phantom barriers.
Yeah. I think the longer you do something, you get accustomed to the internal intelligence of doing something. So it's like, well, this is how we've done it before, or well, we only have so many people to do it this way, and and that becomes like a a fake prison, of possibility.
Totally.
It's sort of like, well, especially when you're talking about event culture, which is I think, Mia, I know you and I share this. We thrive on things never staying in the same place.
Yes.
And you have to work with people that also like the stimulation that creates. And that's not an overwhelming thing. That is actually an exciting thing.
Totally.
And it's really a certain kind of work personality biorhythm that can really keep moving. Because even if you have a model that stays the same, you still have to produce it in such a short period of time where there are so many factors that are outside your control that change the course of things getting done. And then when you want to actually keep changing the face of the fair every year because the content changes, the format to change with it, that becomes an even bigger kind of challenge, right? Exciting challenge for people. And that's you see it even with people that are very, very established in the field. There's something about predicting consistency that's very appealing, especially when they have to come to New York every year at the same time. They want to stay at the same hotel. They want to have the same spot on the floor for their exhibition. And I get that. I am a little bit like that. But there has to be a bit of a balance between that and then the fair continuing to remain dynamic through its growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dynamism is key.
Yeah.
Because it's also something that excites viewers, right? Like, I think and then I'm going to argue with myself. So like there is a kind of viewer that does want to come in and see things in the same way. But I also think that if that predictability is a liability in the same way that they think they want things the same, but it's when you show them something that perhaps is a little unexpected or like a new way to walk through a space. That's refreshing, or like it has this way of like it's a sense of renewal.
Yeah.
And it keeps people like looking in new ways. You know what I mean? Like, I think that if you think you know what to expect, then you stop really seeing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You're trying to kind of keep um, that numbness away,
Yeah.
that ossification that can happen in exhibitions that are too similar to each other over a period of time.
Yeah.
And or the sense of obligatory looking versus pleasure looking.
Right.
And it's a challenge.
Because like ultimately, I think that you want to create a condition where someone can get a little lost.
Yeah.
Where they like, and I think that, we all have these moments where you connect with an artwork, you see something really powerful, and like everything else goes away. That like, and so creating situations where people stay alert and open to that experience, I think is so important in our fair.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. And I think like, how do we do that online is like a, big question right now.
Huge question.
Yeah. And, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot as I look at fairs online is, really asking myself and the team, like, how do we create a moment of discovery? Because that to me is like part of the beauty of like walking a show floor is that like, like how, like looking at how the curation of the exhibitors and like, what booth, kind of is next to what exhibitor is next to another one, what artwork is next to another one. When I find myself scrolling through, an art fair online and it's like an alphabetized list of galleries, I like loses something for me. Or I want something more. Like I want to be able to, I'm surprised by something.
Yeah.
Is that something that you look for?
When I'm going to other fairs online? For me, the online fair experience has been very binary. It's it's thumbnails and information and an inquire button.
Yeah.
So that obviously I'm not buying, so I'm not inquiring because it's basically right now it's extremely transactional. But I don't think that not necessarily equates to more transactions happening because you're extremely transactional. I think you're missing the opportunity in these online forums to actually engage and discover new artists. And part of that is just you need to be in front of things and think about them before you buy them. And so if you already know the artist well and you happen to see it on an online platform and you're going to acquire that based on that, you have confidence that that's going to work. But I think it's harder to think about a new artist without having the imagination around the artwork and getting that. So that's what's got to be developed now. And I think galleries and artists are leading that charge because they can try things, and then if they don't work, they can shift what that means much faster than the bigger fairs can. But everybody's got to start somewhere, and it's all value added in the end. So it's positive. And honestly, if the sales happen that wouldn't have happened at any other time in that day, it's a positive. But I think that we have a huge challenge on us to, as we said, to explore those missing areas, particularly the conversation, and how that works, because you want to get lost. You want to get lost from, into ideas that you never, and meeting people that you never really would have imagined meeting when you woke up that morning. And that's what fairs are for. So the online experience has to provide for that. And I think that it will. It just needs to be, developed. What I look for when I go through a fair is, first online, it's to me a research tool more than anything else. It's a way for me to index and note updates of the galleries that I'm following first and foremost, and the artists that they're representing, and what's new from the studio. Then it's a way for me to see pricing and categories of pricing across a marketplace. And then thirdly, it's thinking about the navigation, similar to walking through a fair, saying, oh, wow, what are the walls like? What are the entry points like? What are the bottlenecks? Just like you walk through a museum and you're like, there's a pencil mark on that white wall. Why can't someone come and erase that? If it were my museum, I would see it. There's just like details that you just are trained over time to kind of
totally
create this kind of diary about, and then from all those levels of engagement, you assess the value of that experience. Yeah. But I'd rather go to a studio visit or
fantastic
graphic exhibition if I want to think about an artist's work. For me, it's always richer and more, and more meaningful.
Yeah.
And I think independent tends to have the majority of the shows are solo shows, and I think there's good reason for that. I think it's an opportunity to go deeper.
Yeah.
But both are valuable. The research is valuable. Having the index,
absolutely,
price. It's a snapshot of the current market as it stands, whatever that is, and. It's interesting because you realize that there's so many malleable variables to it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Good.
I'm cognizant of the fact that we both have other calls in 10 minutes.
Sure.
So I feel like
I think we covered a lot. I mean, we did
cover a lot.
Blue sky thinking, which is good.
Yes. Yeah. We dove into some details. There must be a crazy storm coming in here because it's really dark.
Well, this morning maybe it's coming up from us because it's it was very rainy yesterday and today, and it's just turned sunny during this call,
nice,
which is good.
Nice.
Thank you for having me to be
close to. Sorry.
Thank you for inviting me to take part in this.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Always a pleasure, my friend. This is great.
Great to see you. Anytime.
Yeah,
Let's
awesome.
keep it going. Okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Thanks for having us.